And I'll just use my voice for right now, and you can let me know if I'm not talking loud enough. But yeah, thank you, Jackie, and everybody at the Mountaintop Library and Historical Society for keeping RIP alive and celebrating the Earth. So really honored to be here. And I don't know, who else is excited about the idea that the Earth could be conscious and sentient? Yes, okay, yes, that makes sense because, you know, I'll reference anthropologist Jeremy Narby. He says if our consciousness bubbled up out of the earth, then of course that would make sense that the earth itself is conscious. So I'll leave it there. You know, I don't know however you want to chop it up, but yeah, my name's Matt Bua. I'm an artist. You know, and I believe everyone's artists because whether you like it or not, you've created your whole life. You know, whether it's creative or uncreative, you've created it. So I'm not saying I'm different. I'm just saying, as an artist, though, you're allowed to go across all different subject matters. You know, an anthropologist stays in anthropology. A geologist stays with the rocks. But, you know, artists were allowed to just follow the trails where they go. And my story is that I was in New York City doing a lot of like installation art, and then I was able to get some land on Cotterskill Road in 2006. Whenever I was in New York, since we were bringing up Cotterskill Falls, whenever we could get out of the city, we would always go to Cotterskill Falls. And to reference Washington Irving, the star of Rip Van Winkle, if you haven't read the postscript recently, the star of the story is the Cotterskill Falls because there's somebody, an outsider, who goes up and finds these gourds in the crotches of trees. They try to steal it, and they make off with it, and the Cotterskill Falls smashes them to bits. And so Washington Irving, as Cindy said, only saw them from the sloop going up the Hudson River. But then when he came back to America after being gone for 17 years, he wanted to go to the mountain house in the waterfall. And he went through and he said about all the people, he's like, people are led as if by magic. That was his comment on his letter to his brother. And then he went out and tried to find Black Hawk while young 18-year-old Abraham Lincoln was also going out there. So side note, but, you know, thank you to the waterfall and, you know, and she, the planet Earth, that everyone all around the world, they didn't flip a coin and say she is our mother. They didn't just get lucky 50-50. Everyone around the earth, she is a feminine goddess. Let's see. So I got this property in 2006, and then I started asking everyone, what are these walls? I was instantly fascinated. There's like terraces. There was this and there was that. And I got the normal kind of story, field clearing piles, boundary markers. They're just enclosing farm animals. And not until I wandered, off the path and I found all these other structures. And I'm curious, how many here have found other structures in the woods that aren't walls? You know, that yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things that don't fit into that single storyline. And trying to remember his name, Forest Forensics, the author of Forest Forensics, says, well, if you want to mark property, you would just blaze a tree. You put your initials in it. That's going to be a lot more easy than building a massive 5-foot wall, you know, that runs for miles and miles. And until I found the cairns, then I decided I would buy all the books about the stone walls, the history. There was a book by Robert Thorson. I don't know if you've read that, Stone by Stone. And then there's Susan Allport's book, Sermon in Stone. Her book came out first, and then Robert Thorson's book came out. So I was like, I'm excited. I want to find, because history is the study of written records. Correct? Right. And prehistory is supposedly this time when they didn't keep records, but we got Ojibwa birch bark scrolls, we have Micmac language, we have lots of pre-contact languages, but let's forget about that. History is the study of written records. So I went through Robert Thorson's book and Susan Allport, and there was only one primary source. Meaning an eyewitness account of I built something with stone, whatever. I know there's a lot more, and now we're finding more because of the internet. You can put in search words and PDFs. But it turns out, so was anyone on the debating team in high school or anything? Or is there debating teams anymore in schools at all? I don't know. But I didn't join the debating team, but the logic of, the logic that they took to say that all the stone walls were built post-contact, meaning after Henry Hudson landed in 1609, is called negative evidence. We found nothing to support the wall. We found no history of the walls being built, therefore it must have been too mundane. Therefore, all the walls were built by the settlers in post-1609. But so there's these numbers. In 1871, U.S. agricultural fence census, they sent out these fence viewers to count people's walls around the farms. And they got a rough tally of 252,000 miles. You know, you can circle the moon, circle the Earth maybe 7 or 9 times with that. The moon's 240,000. Robert Thorson said it was 109,000 years worth of work. 40 million days of man-hour. Susan Allport said it's like building the pyramids 20 times over. You know, a lot of work. A lot of work. Let's see. But I don't know. You know, people came. We had the year without summer in 1816, meaning Mount Tambora erupted. It snowed in the middle of the winter here. That it erupted in 1815. It snowed in 1816. We had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and then by 1809, when Jefferson did something with the economy, you know, we had the Panic of 1809, then the Panic of 1819. Mass exodus. Once the trains and the Erie canals were being built, all the food was being produced out west. That's what the rent wars were about, if you know about that. The tenant farmers were saying, you've crashed our economy. Wheat prices plummeted 70%, like we can't pay you, so they tried to not pay. And by all means, you know, interject if I'm going too fast or you want me to clarify anything. I'm trying to compress the talk. But there was a mass exodus from the farms. So let's see, look at this timeline. I don't know, you probably can't see it, but the official story, according to Robert Thorson and Susan Allport and all the other people that say all the walls were built after post-contact, was we had wood. We had wood to make rail fences. You can, I think Abraham Lincoln had to cut 1,400 rails for a pair of blue jeans. The lady wanted 400 rails for every yard of fabric. He had long legs. But one person, he really wanted the blue jeans, but he split some rails. So that gives you an idea. So for the first 3 or 4 generations, we cut down all the trees, we made rail fences, and then according to this official story, was the stone wall building explosion was 1715 until 1815. And in that, you know, is that 100 years or less, whatever, they built the 252,000 miles of walls. But once again, it's hard to find any evidence. I don't know, has anyone ran across any primary sources or historic sources about, because this would be the largest project in the history of America, building the pyramids 20 times over. So this is a population map, 1770, but there's little dots on here, and if you want to go up, but up where we are, there's hardly any dots, and the dot is approximately 200 inhabitants. Roland Townsville, or Catskill Mountain House author, you know, said in 1700, Plymouth and Virginia colonies had 65,000 people. All of upstate New York lagged way behind with around 20,000. So how did New York State have 95,000 miles of stone walls when people weren't there hardly? I mean, the Kiskatone, where I studied, it was, you know, people abandoned it during the Revolutionary War. They didn't really know. It's sparse population. So 95,000 miles of walls is I-40 across the country around 27 times. So amazing, right? And has anyone, let's see. So has anyone used LiDAR? Does anyone know about this information called LiDAR? Yeah, and what have you used the LiDAR for? Or
well, you can definitely see the walls and the old roads and stuff in the area, and generate topographic maps.
yeah, it's an excellent tool, either by satellite or airplane. They stippled the ground, and now you can get this data and see a picture of the ground, of the walls, the old roads. It's available on USGS or whatever. They also actually give you a measuring tool. But that got released probably a few years after the book came out, and anyone can go use it. So a wall you might have thought just went 1 mile in due east-west, you can zoom out and see that it goes many, many more miles. So Robert Thorson has been doing great work. He went to Little Compton, Rhode Island. It's a 20-mile mass, and then they drew a picture of all the walls. There were 367 miles of walls in this 20-mile mass, and you can do that on your own property if you want, and count up all the walls you have there. So 252,000 miles is a very low estimate, because the fence viewers in 1871 weren't wandering in the woods. You go to a top of a mountain and you're like, why is a wall here? Or you find an old foundation. Has anyone found an old well in an old foundation in the middle of nowhere? So by the time the archaeologists and people got out to the Midwest, when they found the old stone foundations, they didn't say, oh, this is a settler who just quarried into the solid bedrock and made this old foundation. They said, these are ancient stone vaults. We also had to make the story of the Prestine myth, that when we got here it was a complete wilderness, and that the natives left the stones untouched, and they didn't have a stone building tradition. That was kind of a general kind of idea. I mean, Jesse Vetchen Van Vetter, went along with that, but I wonder how a people in the supposed Stone Age, meaning they didn't have smelting, but that's to be discussed later, how could they leave the stones untouched? Let's see. So, yeah, I'll show you, there's a lot of these. This isn't a wall. This isn't a foundation, but it's basically built terraces, built structures that this is built in the side of the hill, and it has this very specific design, a small little niche here, but it's quarried into the bedrock. My favorite, I Ching 48, says civilizations come and go, but the spring and the well remain. Because I don't know if anyone thinks hey, let's go dig a well and lay a dry stack stone, casing. If you think you're just going to do that, you don't just do that. It's like those wells have been here. And once again, in archaeological terms, when they got out to the Midwest and they found the circular stone dried wells, that they were like, this is ancient. They would, get all the sludge out, and then they would say, oh, at 15 feet we found this, and they would pull out all the artifacts. So when you find an old well in the woods, don't just say, oh, somebody dug this, because as you know, digging in the Catskills, you got about, this much soil, and then, it quickly hits rock. I mean, Kiskatone Flats, where Story Farms is, that was farmland that was farmed before the Europeans came, and we just assimilated. And but let's see, who built the old stone walls of the Northeast? Well, I mean, when they got to the Southwest and they saw the Anastasi ruins, they said, who built all these stone structures? I mean, the Hopi would say, oh, it's the Anastasi, the ancient ones, because who knows how long they've been there. Or when they got to Snaketown, that they renamed Phoenix, because one civilization rises out of the flames of another, they had to dust off the Hohokam irrigation canal system, which was, arguably one of the largest canal systems in the world. Let's see. So has anyone cleaned up their stone wall or allowed themselves to just touch the walls? Yeah, because it's a fun experiment. With all due reverence, I can't help it. I have as Devo said, the uncontrollable urge, like just to take the stones that fell off and put them back on top. With all due reverence, and then next thing you know, I'm going down, the walls are going up until you hit solid bedrock. You're getting to the bottom of it, you know? And you realize these aren't just like on plowed soil, they're integral to the bedrock below. And sometimes the walls go up another 3 feet and I go down 3 feet. And the deeper you go, the higher you climb, if I can use a Beatles reference. But the further down in the dirt you go, the further back in time you're going. So I'm going to read my favorite Arthur Parker quote. Arthur Parker was part Seneca. He wrote the archaeological history of New York State in 1924. He was very active up in Albany. But so this is my quote, because I don't, and I've never found an arrowhead. I've never found an artifact. I'm not looking for artifacts. Like, as I'm digging, I just put, if I find interesting rocks and, they've got eyes in them, and I don't know, I know, sometimes I'll show people a rock like that and they're like, you're just seeing faces. I'm like, well, whether I'm seeing faces or not, whether it's pareidolia or not, like many times, like, we're allowed to create the myth that serves us. So when I'm staring at the eyes, smiling, whoever put the eyes in there, they're staring back. So this is Arthur Parker, quote, "One seldom recovers from the surprise and delight upon discovering an arrowhead. From it they receive a psychic inoculation that brews in their blood a pabulum, which means food, upon which their own remote biological past in physical contact with their own ancestral life is completed, thus bridging the gap, the long, seemingly bottomless chasm that separates yesterday and today." So that's cool. So he's saying he finds this arrowhead and he gets a psychic inoculation that connects him with the past. So some people think time is just linear, but we've all, maybe you think of your deceased loved ones, and my mom appears as a hummingbird. So this is a way that these, no one buys an old dilapidated house and says, don't touch it, and then, allowing yourself to build these things back up. Eli Lilly, before he made Prozac to help his wife, he was an antiquarian. He wrote all these amazing books, but one of the things he wanted was a reverse time-lapse film. So for me, the reverse time-lapse film is just putting the rocks on, and you can see how entropy has just broken them down. But historically, I want to go back to the walls. Historically, all you find is the hatred of the walls. They refer to it as the tyranny of taxes, the eyesore on the landscape. George Washington was in Rye, New York in 1789, right after the beginning of the Stonewall building explosion. But he says, all these fields look imprisoned. Like, what are all these walls doing? Because if you want to farm, you don't put walls in between your fields. And then the rock crusher comes. And they want to build roads. And as Cindy said, all the roads were Native American trails that just got improved upon. The Schoharie Turnpike, 9W. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel. Civilizations are coming, and you're like, oh. The rock crusher comes, and then people gleefully go, take these things away and crush them and make our roads. So it wasn't like, your grandfather built that, don't touch that, sweat and toil. But, and then I'll do another Washington Irving quote, because he always referenced fairyland, and J.R. Tolkien also referenced fairyland. It wasn't the flighty, etheric thing. It was like when you're out in nature, you know, there's magic out in nature. So he spent a lot of time in nature. But when I was very young, I had an impossible flow of spirits that often went beyond my strength. Everything was fairyland to me. Meaning, you know, like some people call it green alcohol. That's the air that the trees put out. And so that's a good quote. I don't know. So this is a brief archaeological history of ancient occupation stone walls in the New York area. We're given a 45,000 year ago entrance to America. You know, I'm not really into the Bering Land Bridge. How long ago did they get to Australia on boats? Of course, they could have came up from South America. You know, the last ice age. When did the last ice age recede? Does anyone know? 4 o'clock. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The ice thawed, and now we're here. But before the ice, were people here? We don't know. So 16,000 years ago. These are general. I don't even know. I'm, once again, just an artist. But then we got the Paleolithic flint mine, you know, across from the drive-in, which is 12,000 years ago. If you're going to the Kixaki drive-in, there's that road that says Flint Mine Road. Arthur Parker was really excited to save that site and make it a major site. He says this is the greatest monument in New York State. It's literally a mountain of arrowhead nappings, and that chert, you know, appears everywhere. But then Robert Funk, who, you know, many years great professor of geology, and he referenced 2,000 missing years in the archaeological record of Greene County. I've asked some people, like, what did he mean by that? What is that all about? And then some historians like, oh, it's been solved. I'm like, well, what do you mean? But this was, yeah, and we do have carbon dating of a lot of sites now. And, you know, our friend Glenn Kreisberg has done some luminescent dating on some sites, and he's got some early dates. And sometimes the USGS topo maps, this is just this is a 1920 topo map, but you get to see like the intricacies of the walls. Has anyone, I mean, say you're taking the Taconic down to New York City, or any roads in Greene County, but a lot of times the walls will intersect 90 degrees, the ones that are going east-west. You're going north, but if you slow down or just count your Mississippis, for many, many miles, those walls are in the same intervals. You know, was everyone around, you know, like, you know, let's build it all like at the same intervals, or are there cardinal alignments? And speaking of the earth, a lot of people talk about an energy earth grid, meaning the earth has energy. St. Michael spearing the dragon, according to John Michel, was an analogy for, you know, you're tapping the earth energy. So some people say standing stones or acupuncture of the earth. So a lot of these walls, when you're going, they're due east and west. And has anyone here played with dowsing rods? Right. And dowsing rods, you know, you don't have to look for water with dowsing rods. You can, when you find a circular stone well, dry stacked, you can walk around it and you can see the dowsing rods put off 4 lines in 4 directions. You know, don't take my word for it. Just bend up some clothes hangers, wholly, and then as you walk through like 2 walls, the rods will split. As you stand on top of a giant triangular boulder, the walls will make that angle. Because once again, we're electric beings. The earth, we're from the earth, and then these wires are just like, they're reading stuff. I've never looked for water. I'm just like curious what they are. But I used to see little features in the walls. And if you clean up the walls, they don't just become single walls. They have niches in them, meaning like there's a very specific method to the madness. They're built very specifically, and then the dowsing rods will confirm that, oh, every 6 and 9 paces there's this. So his name was David Yarrow. He was a dowser, and he was on this apple farm, and I was walking around with him, and he says, I keep telling the apple farmer that there's a big, powerful line of energy going through here, and the apple farmer that he was staying with didn't believe all the dowsing stuff, so the apple farmer kept planting a tree there. And what happened to the tree each time he planted it? It died. Yes, because it can't handle the energy. And so, we can interject with questions because I. Yes. Yes, there was a period. Like, let's see. Did I put it on here? Yeah, it was Whitney who did the gin mill. It was his son who invented the rock crusher. And then once the rock crusher was invented, yes, they were talking about strip mining. Like, we got to use these rocks for something. So yeah, they were knocking all the rocks down. Also, oh yes.
There's an interesting, if you go all the way down to the end of Westkill, the road,
Right.
and off to the left before you get on the trail, there's nice stone walls, but behind it are very strange, interesting structures. Do you sort of know what I'm talking about?
I don't know the area offhand, but if we found the map, and yes, and does anyone know Sir Jonathan Fraser's The Golden Bough?
Yeah.
It's like it was a 12-volume book that then but he's anthropology. He's studying cultures. I think secondary. He was collecting sources, but there's one chapter in the second volume called The Scapegoat about transference of sticks and stones, and it's a world culture of building cairns for different reasons. And even primary sources, we have a native chief saying, here is a fallen somebody, this is where we're building something. But Fraser references, when you climb a mountain, you would take this rock and deposit it, and that's your fatigue. You're transferring. So there's all these different reasons people all over the world have been, making these cairns. And then I would say, you can get the USGS LiDAR site and go put in your coordinates or your address and look at that and see how it plays in and how it plays into the bigger picture. I'm going to be wrapping up soon, but Ben Franklin, before barbed wire, there was braided wire. And before it was even patented, Ben Franklin was in Philadelphia saying, this stuff is amazing. If you want to enclose farmland, boom, just get a roll, you're done. Or if you want to mark your property, just blaze a tree. You don't have to. I want to say that 109,000 years of man hours, Robert Thorson says all that is trivial because that's only if a person has the rocks stacked up. But the official story is 3 or 4 generations in, they were clearing their fields. By the way, all the stone walls are not built out of field stones, which are rounded, meaning they heaved up. They're built out of roughly quarried stone. And now we have these reservoirs and have all these quarries that, where it all came from. But, it's trivial for, just building the stone wall. That's the easy part. If the stones are right there, he said the amount of work that went into getting the stones to the site and building it. So there's just not enough time. So my story isn't like I know exactly who built it. I am sure, because I'm not really going to buy negative evidence. And these walls are much more. When you go to Peru, when you go to South America, when you go to Mexico, when you go to the Southwest, if you look at the Hopi gardens, the Zuni gardens, they're stone enclosures, they're square, and how the walls all channel. One thing Robert Thorson did say was his quote was I can't tell. The walls are so tightly enmeshed with the streams and everything else like it's always about water. This is, I mean, you can read it later, but in 2012, you know, when there was a wall going to a bend in a stream, and then off to the side were all these stone indentions, and I was just like going down, and then I realized water was like running in. And something that Maver and Dix in their book Manitou said was a lot of the walls either encircle the marshland or terminate at streams and marshes. Because, yes?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That wasn't a question. Okay. So seeing just the relationship between the walls and the water, that's so important. This is a picture. A.C. Vorman, does anyone know Edward Sheriff Curtis? Whenever you see black and white photographs in the early 1900s, Edward Curtis is the photographer. But A.C. Vorman was there on the same day, and this well with all its stonework, you know, it was cool because I know the Edward Sheriff Curtis photo, but now we have this one. He was there the same day, and water is actually starting to fall. But just as an example of, you probably, I find a lot of these, water holes in the middle of the woods with like stones around them. You know, once again, it's a two to tango situation. It's feng shui, the ancient art of arranging your landscape so that it benefits the most number of people. That is, feng shui is people working together to benefit. So you don't want to bury anybody up from your fresh drinking water. There was a little spot in New York called Maiden Lane that was like a beautiful babbling brook. The lovers went, but then eventually they put the Negro burial ground just up water from it. So it's not the Maiden Lane anymore. You know, it's the contaminated water. So, but feng shui is the art of people working together, and yeah. And let me look at my time. Yeah, I could go on and on, obviously. Yes.
There were 250,000 miles of stone walls. Who built them?
My thing is they were all
Already
there. They were all already there. So there's a place in, I want to say 2002, New York Times had an article about they sonared the whole Hudson River, and they found all the sunken ships, but they found parallel stone walls under the water that the New York Times kind of off the cuff said built 3,000 years ago, because during the Ice Age, we're told that the ocean was 75 to 200 feet lower. You know, so if you're into the Atlantis story, that makes sense. Like, and then because all that water was up in the ice, and then as it melted, glaciers receded. So evidence of stone walls under the river. I would say, you know, the same people that did this stonework, and I, 11 generations back, no matter who we are in this room, if you do the math now, we are all related. We share a relative. 33 generations back, according to the new studies, we all share a mother. So it was one human race. The pagan was those of the countryside. Paganos means country dweller. So if anyone watched Little House on the Prairie and read the books, but the first show that Nellie appears in, what does she call Laura and Mary? What's her big put down? And it's the name of the show. The first, if you watch Little House on the Prairie, that girl Nellie, who was the little scooch, she was like, she said country girls. That was her big put down, you know? So like, we are all earth people, you know? So, you know, and then like, yeah. So that's my uplifting, but yeah, who built them? I would say the same people that built the stone walls of the Southwest, the Yucatan. Now that we have LIDAR, and you've probably heard about the Yucatan studies, they're like, oh, we just thought it was a pyramid that went this miles. Now they're like, oh, no, it spread through the whole forest. Or in Peru, they're like, oh, they're using maybe 20% of the terraces that used to go all the way up. Or, you know, carbon dating sites, the site west, you know, Mystery Hill is in Massachusetts. It got carbon dated to 4,500 years ago by Harvard. archaeologists. So we have, tons of evidence of pre-existing stone walls. Boston was called the Chemont Peninsula. It was oh no, these weren't savages that, lived in the forest. It was a treeless world that they also commented trees grow here and there as if in our parks back home. I think Morton in 1600, a European. So they noticed this humanized landscape. We have, does anyone know what Cahokia is? Yeah. What is Cahokia?
Mounds built by the pre-Native American mound building civilizations called the Mississippians, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah, and it's a truncated pyramid that never got complete. It would have been the world's largest pyramid if they built it. So, once again, high civilization. Cyrus Thomas. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up soon. All right, cool. I have a couple of books to sell. For the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.